Hello, this is Frank Falvey with Frank Presents, and today it is my privilege and honor to have Judith Perkins with us. Judith is a candidate for the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. Judith, tell us a little about your growing up and your background.
Well, I was born in New York City, and I moved to upstate New York and grew up in a town called Woodstock, which people know of as where the Woodstock Festival was supposed to be, but it actually wasn't. And then I was lucky enough to get a full financial aid scholarship to Smith College in Northampton when I was 17, and that is how I got to Massachusetts.
Is Smith College still an all-women's college?
It sure is. And yeah, why are you laughing?
Like Wellesley.
Yes, it's a seven-sister, and it's still a women's college. And then from there, I went to Boston University School of Law. So my entire and I stayed in Massachusetts ever since. So my entire adult life I've spent in Massachusetts.
How did you like Smith?
I loved it. I mean, Smith was really life-changing for me, and that's because when I had a pretty chaotic childhood. When I was a newborn baby, my mother suffered from severe postpartum depression and died by suicide. And then a few months later, when I was just 4 months old, my father was stabbed during a riot in New York City and nearly died. And so after that, my childhood was full of neglect, poverty, substance abuse of the adults in my life. And so school was an escape for me. And so I managed to graduate from high school in 3 years and get into Smith and I have them pay for the whole ride basically with that and Pell Grant and Social Security death benefits. I was able to go to Smith, and so it really made all the difference for me.
That is important. That not only because the college reached out. But where did you go to high school? Was it a public high school in New York?
Yes, I went to a large regional high school in New York, in upstate New York. So I grew up in a place that's not so different from the more rural parts of Norfolk County. So even though I was born in New York City, I really consider myself a country girl at heart. And my graduating class was 254. The geographic radius of my school district was 25 miles. But it was a good school, and I knew people from I still have friends from kindergarten, and that I went to school with all the way through. And I think, honestly, the stability of a small town really helped. The teachers that I had at my school were legendary. You know, you knew coming up, oh, next year I'm going to have teacher X, and everybody knows that they're the one you have to have. And I think that made a big difference for me, too.
Did you have cousins that you were close to or other family growing up?
Not really. I mean, I have an older sister and a younger half brother. But no, our cousins lived our extended family was all out of state. Didn't really have contact with my mother's family or my father's family, and I had a series of stepmothers. So yeah, not really.
Well, Boston University you must have really enjoyed.
Yeah, well, I went there sight unseen. It was where I got into law school, and I had this idea that, you know, I was going to go to the best school I could get into, even if it meant borrowing every penny. Because by then I had decided that, you know, and Smith really encouraged this too, that, you know, you're raised to give back. And of course, for me, with my own life, I think I was incredibly frustrated and angry as a kid about my life situation, and I became a lawyer to be the voice for other people that I hadn't had myself. And so I was going to go to law school and make that happen.
Did the influence of growing up the way you did influence you to become a public prosecutor?
Absolutely. It definitely did. During my first semester, by college, I already knew, actually in 5th grade, I already knew that I was going to be a lawyer. I didn't exactly know what that meant, but it started when I was in 5th grade, and my teacher gave us awards at the end of the year, but each based on your personality.
Yeah.
My award was the Scales of Justice Award.
Oh.
And I didn't know what that meant. And so after class, and I was disappointed because I wanted to get the English award, because at the time I was thinking I was going to be a writer. And so I went to my teacher and said, "What does that mean, Mrs. Klotzberger?" And she said, "Well, you're always standing up for all the other kids in class. And so that's what a lawyer does." And I said, "Oh, maybe that's what I'm going to do." And so actually it was from that time. And then when I was and then in college, actually, I got an award at graduation for a student intending to pursue a career in law in the public interest. When I was in college, I got into this prestigious internship program, and it was where you'd go to Washington, D.C. and work for somebody that was influential. And I was able to get an internship at the Supreme Court of the United States. And so, when you go there and you see how that works, and you're in the cafeteria with at lunchtime with justices of the Supreme Court, that is a pretty, and I also was the person I worked for. I worked in the office of the administrative assistant to the Chief Justice, who was Rehnquist at the time. So, that was, an incredible experience.
Now this wasn't like being the Chief Justice's
Clerks.
intern.
No, because I was too young for that.
Clerk.
Right. I was still, so our job, there were 3 of us at a time. Our job was basically to write speeches based on legal history for the Chief Justice when he would go to speak to community groups. And also back then, it was real physical newspapers. We were news clipping, about anything related to the Supreme Court. And we got to go watch oral arguments. So I watched some of the famous arguments, and we got to sit in this little special place where we could see all the justices sitting on the bench, but from the side in profile. It's pretty cool. But anyway, so then when I went to law school, during the first semester of law school, Carol DeMady Stewart was murdered. And do you remember that case?
No,
The Stewart murder was initially, it was a pregnant woman who was shot I think she was shot in the abdomen, and her husband was also shot. And she died immediately. They saved the baby for a few days, but the baby eventually died too. And the husband survived, but he claimed that the shooter was a black man from Boston. They had come out of their Lamaze class, their childbirth classes. Yeah. And so the whole city went crazy because this was such a horrific murder. But it turned out in the end that it was actually Charles Stewart himself who had murdered his wife, and in the end, or who is believed now to have murdered his wife. And he committed suicide by jumping off the Tobin Bridge and left a suicide note behind. But it was a huge deal, and I just finished reading the book Common Ground in college, which was all about busing in Boston in the 70s. And so that was, I think, when I really became a Bostonian. But my point in telling that story is the murder of Carol DeMady Stewart led to an investigation of the Boston police conducted by the U.S. Attorney's Office to see if they had, in the wake of that murder, violated the civil rights of young black men around the city, because there was this whole thing where they were stopping and frisking every young black man, or many young black men. And so I got an internship in the U.S. Attorney's Office with Ralph Martin, who was assigned to do this investigation for the Justice Department. And that made me really want to be that whole experience made me really want to be a prosecutor. And then the following summer, I had an internship at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in New York City and worked for the Police Integrity Unit. So that was also prosecuting police for public corruption. And then, so by then I knew that I wanted to be a prosecutor. So that was a long answer to a short question.
Well, you're running for a district attorney
Yes.
office in Norfolk County.
Yes.
What does the district attorney do?
So what a lot of people don't realize is how much power the district attorney really has. The district attorney is totally responsible for making decisions about every single crime that's charged and who is charged with crime. They can decide not to prosecute something, and they can also decide to prosecute one event in many different ways. There are many different ways to charge the same thing, depending on how serious you think it is. The more serious the crime, obviously, the more serious the penalty. So if somebody comes in and you think, oh, look at that record, look at this person's prior record, look at what he did here, that's a really serious case, we need to charge it appropriately. But they can also decide that, this case is, we just don't feel like prosecuting it, or we don't think it meets the evidence. So, and no matter what decision the district attorney makes, they have total immunity from lawsuits. So you can't do anything about it. it's literally the only check on the power of the district attorney in making those decisions is the voter. And a lot of people don't realize that. People think, oh, it must be the attorney general who supervises the DA. No. People think it might be the governor. No. It's just the voter. And so it's really important that people, there's also many times when the district attorney can't tell you what's going on because to protect the privacy of the people involved or to protect the integrity of an investigation. So for that reason, it's incredibly important that the person that you choose as district attorney, you really, really trust them. And to trust them, you have to have, obviously the person has to have a certain level of professional qualifications, but really the job is about judgment. Is this a person who is able to tell the difference between real evil, because I'm going to tell you there is evil in the world, a bad decision made on a bad day, and every little degree in between, so they can make those decisions appropriately and speak for people who aren't otherwise spoken for.
How many cases in a year does a district attorney office have in Norfolk?
So in Norfolk, that is a great question. My guess would be, and my numbers are sort of more based on Suffolk County because that's where I served, but I believe it'll be a somewhat smaller. My guess would be around 6,000 in the district court and probably a couple of hundred in the superior court.
6,000
probably
round numbers.
In the 6 different district court. I mean, there are 5 district courts in the superior court.
Now, there's no way that you're going to convince me that the district attorney is going to review all 6,000 cases.
Correct.
So there's got to be some level of the district attorney trusting the people that work for him.
Correct.
How do you judge people that work for you? Or have you been in that position?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I was in the Attorney General's office under Scott Harshbarger. That was my first job out of law school. And then after that, by that time, Ralph Martin had become the district attorney in Suffolk County. And so then I went to work for Ralph. And in working for both of them, they were really legendary, not only as prosecutors themselves and, in their own work, but as bosses. And as teaching us that, this job is about doing the right thing for no other reason than it is the right thing to do. We have so much power and you use it for good and leave the politics to the person at the top. I think it's, so to find that, you're looking for the best of the best and also the people who want to do it to serve others and to do justice.
What type of cases in Norfolk County, of criminal cases or just workload cases? Could you give me some sense of maybe the priority of those cases?
So the whole, all those 6,000 cases and the couple hundred in Superior Court, the couple hundred in Superior Court are, of course, the more serious ones. That's where you find the murders, the terrible burglaries, big drug cases, things like that. In the lower courts, in the district court, is everything from traffic violations, like meaning OUI. Civil traffic violations are also there too, but in the criminal world, it's things like OUI, license operating after suspension, operating underinsured. So a lot of motor vehicle stuff. That's kind of typical. Drugs, lower level drug cases. Shoplifting, burglary, not burglaries, but, breaking and entering, which is kind of the lower form of burglaries. And then there's a lot of domestic violence and a little bit less so in this. These will usually go to the Superior Court. Sexual assault cases and child abuse, elder abuse, hate crimes, all of those person to person and fraud, all those sort of person to person crimes. That makes up about 30 to 35%, I would say, of all crime. And those are the crimes that really have the longest effect, some of the most harmful impacts on the community, on the individuals involved, and also, they're so frequent.
And what is the rest of the 60%?
So the rest of the 60% would be drugs, motor vehicle, and property crimes.
I consider myself somewhat knowledgeable about news and crimes or whatever, you know. But for years now, I mean years, ever since people were crossing the border, I always thought that was a crime. But the other day, I was told, no, that is a civil breaking a civil standard or whatever. That the mere act of crossing the border is not a crime.
You mean if you're
If you're
immigration-wise, you mean?
Immigration-wise, if you're in Nicaragua and you cross the border in Mexico, you come into the United States, that in itself is not a crime, and that's why you don't have to get a warrant, because it's not a crime.
You know, I don't know a lot about immigration because immigration is federal law.
Right.
The only way immigration comes up in state court is a couple ways. So,
Well, it's not. My point is
right.
not
It's not a state
immigration.
crime, correct.
My point is, could you educate me? Are there other civil things that are not crimes that I might mistakenly think is a crime?
Well, a lot of people think restraining orders, you know, when somebody gets a restraining order against their ex-husband or, you know, current husband or partner, a lot of people think that restraining orders are criminal violations, but they're not. A restraining order is actually a civil order. So, and it just orders the person to stay away from each other, to not talk to each other, contact each other through directly or through third person. If you violate the order, that's a criminal offense. But just the order itself is not a criminal offense. However, the existence of restraining orders does appear on your criminal record. So let's say you've never committed a crime, but somebody gets a restraining order on you, that will appear on your record, but it's still not a crime, and it's not meant to be seen as a crime. It's just so that the police who have access to all this, to the criminal histories, know what they're confronting when they go to a house, let's say.
Okay. There's two men meeting, and they get into an argument. Just the two of them. They fight a little, toss a little. Someone calls the police comes, and one of them wants the other person arrested. Not the police don't want to arrest them, right? It's the other person. So at what point is that a crime as opposed to just two guys, you know,
Fighting, right?
fighting?
So you bring up many interesting points in this one question. So police have the right to arrest anybody who commits a felony in the past or in front of them. They also have the right to arrest people for committing misdemeanors that occur in their presence. So a regular assault and battery is a misdemeanor. And so if it happens outside the police presence and the police just show up and they see that, you know, these people are claiming that there's an assault and battery, the police aren't going to arrest either one. They probably will advise whoever wants to file charges will advise them to go to the courthouse and file an application for a criminal complaint on their own. So there's two ways that charges can be brought. Police can bring charges, and then civilians can actually go to the courthouse and file charges themselves too. And then the clerk will hold a hearing to see if there's probable cause to believe that a crime occurred. And then if it does, then it goes forward into court. So that's one piece of your question. And then the other piece is, how do they figure out who is at fault? So anybody who's trying to determine whether or not who was the person at fault, sometimes an assault is considered mutual, but a lot of times the analysis is about, are there relative size differences? Is there any video? Is there any who got injured worse, and how? And so it's really a very fact-specific analysis about what happened to determine whether or not it's legitimate self-defense or whether it's two guys who are equally equally involved.
The present district attorney, over his span of being the district attorney, in my opinion, has done a lot of connecting with every community in Norfolk district. He has done TV shows. He has liaison between communities and drugs things. He seems to be at least very conscious and active and working with each community. How will you handle that?
Listen, I think so. I started my campaign in September of 2024, and the primary election is September 1st of 2026. So by that time, I will have been working around getting to know people around the county for 2 years, and I love how diverse our county is in every way. I mean, in terms of we have cities, we have towns, we have suburbs, we have farms. And it's also diverse in socioeconomic groups and in ethnicities and in religions. And, I think that makes us really amazing and really strong. And I enjoy it. I enjoy going to visit people in the various towns. I think that this district attorney, I'm hearing from a lot of people in towns, especially places like Franklin and in the western parts of the county, that they haven't seen him in years. And in fact, the murder, I learned recently from actually one of the other candidates in this race, who's from Cohasset, who said the murder of, when Anna Walsh was murdered in this really brutal, horrifying way in this tiny town of everybody who knows each other, the district attorney never came to Cohasset and just, sort of listened to people, because a crime like that doesn't just affect that family.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about him going to crime scenes.
No, I'm not either.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's important, I think, for a community to see the district attorney and to know them. And I absolutely agree with that. And I will be everywhere, as I have been, is what I'm trying to say.
It's my understanding that in the process of drugs or other things, you acquire assets, and some of the assets you dispose of turn into cash or whatever. And the tradition apparently has been to return those assets back to, like in Franklin, there's the Safe Coalition. In Rentham, there's a house for people struggling with drugs. Would you continue that tradition?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we could do even more in Norfolk County for substance abuse. We have one drug court, and I would love to see it expanded to some of the other courts too. Funds, resources allowing. I definitely think, I've had family members who have died related to substance abuse, and so I know how important it is. And it's a sensible consequence. Money from drugs should go back into fixing the problems that drug causes.
What is the question that I haven't asked you that you just allowed to talk to the people in Norfolk County about?
I think, or the why I'm running question. I guess you hadn't asked that. And the why I'm running question and why 2 years ahead and all that was because, a lot of people know about the Karen Reed case. That's the one that got all the attention. And that was what, as a former prosecutor myself, that's what made me start paying attention. And I was questioning some of the decisions that were being made. But really the thing that made me decide to run was the failure to investigate and prosecute the murder of Sandra Birchmore. Because
who was Sandra Birchmore?
She was the 23-year-old pregnant woman found dead in her apartment in Canton in 2021. And it initially appeared to be a suicide. But any experienced prosecutor who saw the evidence in that case would have understood that it was in fact a murder. And 2 years later, or in September of 2024, the feds actually indicted the person believed to be her murderer, but they had to charge him with federal crimes because they can't charge murder because that's a state crime. And in their affidavit, they outlined all the evidence that they used in their indictment, and all of that evidence was available at the time of her death. And so it was really and the person who was believed to have killed her was Matthew Farwell, and is charged with killing her, is Matthew Farwell, who was a Stoughton police officer who had met her and been grooming her since she was a 12-year-old girl. And by the time she was 15, he was having sex with her. By the time she was an older teenager, he and his supervisor and their twin brother were also believed to have been having sex with her. And so, to me, to have this happen in our community is absolutely appalling. And to have done nothing about it that is literally the job of district attorney. And we have to be able to speak for every single one of us, especially the most vulnerable among us, which she was. And that was what it really, really disturbed me, because I know how to be a prosecutor. That's a job I know. And so that's why.
Since you left the government into prosecution, what have you done?
So I've been in private practice for the last 20 years. So I was a prosecutor for 10 years, and in my last job, I was the chief of the domestic violence unit in Suffolk County. The last 20 years, I have spent, for the first half of it, I spent representing victims of crime in civil litigation against institutions like the Catholic Church, so for the childhood sex abuse cases and lots of other similar cases. And then the last 13 years, I've had my own practice where I investigate sexual misconduct and discrimination for schools and workplaces and municipalities and police departments. So I've done about 150 of those investigations. And so essentially, I've done very similar work my whole career. I've always retained the identity of prosecutor really at heart. Yeah, so that's why, you know, justice is my thing.
People want to reach you during the campaign.
How do they do it?
How do they do it?
So we have a website, JunaPerkins.com. You can reach the campaign at info@JunaPerkins.com. By the way, the D is silent, but I'm not. So the first name is DJUNA. We also have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. Please follow and like all those things. And thanks so much.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching Frank Presents. I hope you have good health and look forward to meeting you. If you would like to contact the studio on any issue, please feel free. The number is 508-541-4118. This is Frank Falvey and Djuna Perkins.
So nice to meet you.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks so much.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.